I stood there, trembling, my heart pounding in my chest as I stared at the prenup on the table. The ink on the paper seemed to blur as I tried to process what my fiancé's mother was asking me to do. "I'm sorry, what?" I whispered, struggling to keep my voice steady. Her cold gaze never wavered as she pushed the document closer to me, her lips curling into a tight smile. "Sign this, or there's no wedding." "I'm not asking, I'm telling you." Her voice was sharp, and there was no softness in her words. My breath hitched. I felt a surge of panic mixed with disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me. 2 days before the wedding, and you're asking me to sign a prenup." "This is how things are done," she said, her voice growing more impatient. "You'll be married into this family. Don't you want to protect yourself? Don't you want to ensure that everything is in place?" My mind raced. My fiancé, Mark, stood next to her. His face flushed with embarrassment, yet he said nothing. He looked down at his shoes, avoiding my gaze. "Mark, please tell me you're not okay with this." "This isn't how it's supposed to be," I said, my voice trembling. He shifted uncomfortably but stayed silent. My heart sank. I turned back to his mother, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You're asking me to sign away my rights, my security. You don't trust me, do you?" She didn't flinch. "It's not about trust. It's about protection. We've seen enough to know that things don't always go as planned." I stood there, my hands shaking as I picked up the pen. The words blurred in front of my eyes, the finality of the moment sinking in. A part of me wanted to refuse, to walk away from this twisted version of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But another part of me, the part that still wanted to marry Mark, to have the family I always dreamed of, knew this was a decision that couldn't be avoided. Sign. And as I did, a part of me died inside. This wasn't just about money. This was about power, about control. And I had just let her have it. Mark's mother stood up and smiled as she took the paper from me. "Good. Now everything is in place." She turned to Mark, a satisfied look on her face. "We'll proceed with the wedding as planned." I couldn't look at him anymore. Not when I felt so small, so insignificant. Not when I realized that the woman I thought was my future mother-in-law had just shown me exactly what she thought of me. "I'm done," I whispered, my voice barely audible. The room felt suffocating. My fiancé Mark stood beside me, his eyes filled with embarrassment, yet there was something else in his gaze. It was fear. Fear of his mother. Fear of disappointing her. I looked down at the prenup. The paper seemed to mock me, its cold form a reminder of everything I wasn't allowed to forget. 2 days before our wedding, and I was being asked to sign away my rights. Rights I didn't even know I had. "What's going on, Mark?" I asked, my voice shaking, trying to hold it together. "Why are you letting this happen?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't want to upset her. You know how she is, Lucy." His mother stood across from me, arms crossed, watching me with an unwavering coldness. "You'll sign or the wedding is off," she said, her tone sharp and final. "This is how it's done in this family. We protect our own." Her words hit like a slap. Protect our own. Was I not part of this family? Was I not enough just as I was? I turned to Mark, searching for support, for any sign that he didn't agree with this. But all I saw was hesitation, a man trapped between his loyalty to his mother and the woman he was supposed to marry. "You're making a mistake," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't how marriage is supposed to start. Supposed to be about trust, not contracts. What are we really doing here, Mark?" He didn't answer. Instead, he avoided my gaze, his silence louder than any words could be. Tears welled in my eyes. "You can't even stand up for me. For us," I said, my breath catching in my throat. "This isn't just about money. This is about me. About who I am to you." Her cold voice cut through my thoughts. "It's not personal. It's business. Business." I stood there in the middle of my own wedding plans, and the woman I had hoped would be my ally, my second mother, was treating me like a commodity. I looked down at the prenup again. The paper felt heavier now, like it was weighing me down, holding me in place. I could feel the pressure in my chest, the panic rising, but I also felt something else, anger. If you really want me to sign this, then maybe you should take a good look at what it says about you, Mark, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Maybe this is more about control than you're letting on. Mark flinched but didn't speak. His silence, the way he let his mother dictate everything, crushed me in a way I didn't know was possible. Maybe you should just sign it, Mark's mother said, her voice smooth and icy. You wouldn't want the wedding to be ruined over something this simple, would you? Her words stung, but it was the truth in them that hurt the most. This was her power play. This was how she controlled everything. And I was supposed to just accept it. Sign it or leave, she said, the finality of her tone making it clear that there was no room for negotiation. I looked at Mark one last time, hoping for some sign of support, but found nothing. I turned back to the paper, my hand hovering over the signature line. For a moment everything felt wrong. Everything felt like a lie. But then something in me snapped. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her control me, my life, or my future with Mark. Without another word I signed. I sat in my room, staring at the signed prenup. Felt like a betrayal, not just of me but of everything I believed in. I had spent so much time planning the perfect wedding, thinking about my future with Mark. And now, just like that, everything felt tainted. Why did I let this happen? I whispered to myself, feeling the weight of the paper in my hands. I could still hear Mark's mother's voice in my head, the cold, authoritative tone that had made me feel so small. But the worst part was Mark. He hadn't said a word. He hadn't stood up for me. Plus, I heard the door creak open. Mark stood in the doorway, his face a mixture of guilt and confusion. Lucy, he started, but his voice trailed off. I looked up at him, my heart sinking. What do you want, Mark? My voice was sharp, the anger bubbling to the surface again. You don't get to just walk in here after what just happened. He stepped forward slowly, as if testing the waters. I didn't know what to do, he said, his voice weak. I thought this was just the way it had to be. I thought signing the prenup was a small thing. But it's not. I can see that now. Now! I snapped, standing up so fast my chair almost fell over. You didn't even ask me how I felt. You just let her push me around. And now you're telling me. I can see that now. What about everything else, Mark? Where were you when I needed you to stand up for me? Where were you when your mom treated me like a bargaining chip? Mark flinched, the hurt in his eyes clear. But he still didn't say anything. He just stood there silent, watching me. You just let her decide everything for us. You let her ruin what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, I said, my voice breaking. And now I'm the one stuck with the consequences. Not her. Not you. Me. Lucy, please, he started, but I cut him off. No, Mark. This isn't about you or me anymore. It's about everything she's done to me, and everything you let happen. I paused, taking a breath to calm myself. But it was no use. I thought we were building something together. But this doesn't feel like a partnership. It feels like a transaction. I could see the pain in his eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I had given him everything, my trust, my heart, my future, and he had let me down. He had let her decide our fate. And I couldn't go through with it anymore. Not like this. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wasn't going to break in front of him. Not anymore. I can't marry you, Mark, I said, my voice trembling but firm. Not like this. Not when everything feels so wrong. His face went pale. Lucy, no. Please. We've been through so much. I love you. I loved you, I corrected him, my voice cold. But I'm done. I need someone who sees me, who respects me, not someone who lets his mother control everything. I turned away from him, my back to him as I walked towards the door. I'm sorry, Mark. But this wedding is over. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear his footsteps behind me, but I didn't turn around. Couldn't. When I opened the door, I felt the weight of the decision. But I also felt something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. The days following the breakup felt like a blur. I had left Mark, walked away from everything I had thought I wanted. And yet, as I sat alone in my apartment, I felt a strange sense of clarity. First I was angry. Furious. Every time I thought about what had happened, about the prenup, about his mother, about Mark's failure to stand up for me, I wanted to scream. I wanted to go back and erase everything. But then, something inside me shifted. The anger faded into something else. Something deeper. I didn't regret walking away from him. I didn't regret the decision I had made. But I was terrified of what came next. What now? Kept asking myself, where do I go from here? I stared at the calendar hanging on the wall. The wedding day was just 2 days away. But it wasn't my wedding anymore. The silence in my apartment felt louder now. I had spent so long preparing for the life I thought I was going to have, and now it was all gone. I didn't know what to do, who to turn to. But one thing was certain. I couldn't go back to the life I had been living, pretending that everything was fine when it was so clearly not. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. The sun was setting, and the world felt both bigger and smaller at the same time. I thought about the people who had tried to shape me, control me, dictate my future. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need anyone's permission to live my life. It wasn't Mark's mother, or Mark, or anyone else who would define my future. It was me. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed a text to my best friend, Ellie. Hey, I need to talk. Can we meet tonight? I hit send and stared at the screen for a moment. I wasn't sure what I was going to say when we met. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to sit here and let the rest of my life pass me by. I had made the hardest decision of my life by walking away from the wedding, but it was the right one. The choice was mine to make, and for the first time in a long time I felt powerful, in control. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Ellie. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders and opened the door. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but feeling an unexpected rush of relief flood through me. She didn't say anything at first, just wrapped me in a tight hug. I buried my face in her shoulder, letting the tears I had been holding back finally fall. I felt like I had been carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, and in this moment, I didn't have to hold it anymore. We pulled away, and Ellie looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and determination. I'm proud of you, she said softly. You did the right thing. I nodded, wiping away my tears. I don't know what comes next, Ellie. I feel like my whole world just fell apart. Maybe it did, she said, offering me a small, reassuring smile. But maybe that's exactly what needed to happen for something better to grow. She was right. In that moment, I realized I didn't need to have all the answers. I didn't need to know what the future held. I just needed to know that I was going to face it on my own terms. And that, for the first time in my life, felt like the most powerful thing in the world. The days after I broke things off with Mark passed slowly, but each day, I felt more and more sure of my decision. I spent time with Ellie, pouring my heart out to her, but also taking the time to listen to my own thoughts. There was no turning back from the path I had chosen, and in a way, it felt freeing. One afternoon, as I was walking to the park to meet Ellie again, I bumped into an old friend, Sarah. We used to be close back in college, but I hadn't seen her in years. Lucy. Wow, it's been forever, she exclaimed as she wrapped me in a tight hug. We laughed and caught up, and I found myself telling her about the wedding, Mark, and everything that had happened. No way, Sarah said, her eyes wide in disbelief. That's insane. I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that, Lucy. But I have to tell you, I think you made the right choice. I can see it in your face. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. I smiled, feeling a wave of emotion rise up inside me. For so long I had been doubting myself, questioning if I had done the right thing. But hearing Sarah, hearing someone else acknowledge my strength, made me realize something. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. Not to Mark. Not to his mother. And certainly not to anyone who didn't see me for who I truly was. I don't even know what's next for me, Sarah, I said quietly. I feel lost. She looked at me with a comforting smile. You don't need to know right now. You've taken control of your life, Lucy. You've stepped into your power, and that's the first step toward everything you deserve. I nodded, my heart swelling with a mix of emotions. There was still so much uncertainty ahead, but something had shifted within me. I wasn't waiting for anyone to tell me I was good enough. I knew it now. The rest of the week passed in a blur of reflection, friends, and new beginnings. I focused on me, on what I wanted, on what I needed, and what truly made me happy. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt the excitement of possibility. The world was wide open, and I was free to walk down any path I chose. Mark's mother tried reaching out a couple of times, but I didn't respond. I wasn't angry anymore, I was just done. I didn't need their approval or validation to move forward. I had everything I needed within myself. On a quiet evening, as I sat in my apartment alone, looking out at the city lights, I reflected on everything that had happened. The wedding that wasn't, the pain, the betrayal, the decisions. I realized I wasn't the same person I was when I first started this journey. I had come so far and I had learned so much about myself. I finally understood something that had always been elusive to me. True strength comes not from the people around you, but from within yourself. And for the first time I truly felt that strength. I smiled to myself, knowing I was exactly where I needed to be. Weeks passed, and I settled into a routine, but with each passing day, something inside me was changing. I wasn't just moving on from Mark and the wedding. I was redefining myself. I was discovering a version of me I didn't even know existed. One afternoon I decided to take a walk in the park, something I hadn't done in a while. The weather was perfect, sunny with a cool breeze, and as I strolled along the path I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I wasn't trying to hide my emotions or mask my hurt. I was simply existing. I stopped at a bench by a pond and sat down, letting the moment wash over me. A few months ago, I would have been obsessing over what everyone thought of me, especially Mark and his family. But now, I realized that I didn't care anymore. I had stopped letting others dictate who I was. I glanced down at my phone and saw a message from my best friend Ellie. "How are you feeling today?" I smiled and typed back. "I'm good. Actually, I'm more than good. I'm me." And it was true. I hadn't felt this much like myself in a long time. I wasn't the person I had been when I was living under Mark's shadow. I wasn't just the fiancé, the daughter-in-law to be. I was me. The woman who had made difficult choices, who had faced pain and disappointment, and had come out stronger on the other side. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't chasing after anyone's approval. I wasn't seeking anyone's validation. I wasn't defined by the wedding that wasn't or by the relationship that had crumbled. I was defining myself. I was creating my own identity, independent of anyone else's expectations. I looked at the reflection in the pond, the ripples distorting the image of my face, but I saw it clearly. I had become someone who stood tall. Someone who wasn't afraid to walk away from a situation that wasn't right. Someone who had the strength to choose herself over everything else. The power of identity wasn't something I had realized until now. It wasn't just about a job, a relationship, or how others saw me. It was about knowing who I was, deep down, and being proud of that. The past hadn't been easy, but I was learning how to appreciate it for shaping me into this person. A person who was no longer afraid to stand alone. A person who was finally free. It had been months since the wedding that wasn't, and the emptiness I had once felt in my chest had slowly been replaced with a sense of calm. I had finally begun to accept that peace didn't come from external things, like a wedding or someone else's approval. It came from within. One evening, after a long day at work, I decided to take a walk down the street to a little cafe I used to visit with Mark. The idea of going back there was bittersweet, but it didn't hold the same weight it once did. The memories of sitting there with him, talking about the future, had faded. Now it was just a place where I could sit alone with my thoughts. As I sat down at a table by the window, I noticed the people around me. Couples on dates, friends laughing together, strangers lost in their own worlds, and I felt a quiet smile tug at my lips. I wasn't part of any of these groups, but for the first time I didn't feel left out. I didn't feel lonely, felt whole. The waiter brought me my coffee, and as I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, I took a deep breath. The weight I had been carrying, of trying to please people, of worrying about how others saw me, of chasing after approval, had finally lifted. I no longer needed to validate myself through anyone else's lens. It wasn't about the wedding or the future I had imagined with Mark. It was about the person I had become on my own. I had spent so much time fighting for others to see my worth, to acknowledge my efforts, but the real battle had always been within me. The battle to accept myself, to know that I was enough just as I was. And now, sitting here alone, I finally understood it. How did I get here? I whispered to myself, staring into my cup of coffee. But the answer wasn't as complicated as I thought. I had gotten here by choosing myself, by taking back my power and deciding that no one, not even the people I loved, could determine my worth. I looked out the window at the street, watching the world move on around me. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and for the first time I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to tell me who I was. I knew exactly who I was. In that moment, I felt a quiet sense of peace wash over me. This was what I had been searching for all along. Not the perfect wedding. Not the validation of others. Just peace. And I had found it. The phone call came on a rainy evening. I had just wrapped up a meeting, feeling the weight of the last few weeks on my shoulders. Life had felt like it was finally moving forward. But when I saw the caller ID, I hesitated. It was Mark. I had avoided all his calls after the breakup, unsure of what I would even say to him. But something in me knew I couldn't keep running from this. So I answered, "Lucy." His voice cracked on the other end, as if he'd been holding his breath. "I know you don't want to talk to me, and I don't blame you. I need to say this. I've been doing a lot of thinking and I know I messed up. I was too focused on pleasing my mom, and I didn't see what was right in front of me. I didn't see you." I stood in silence, my heart pounding in my chest. His words hit harder than I expected, but there was something else beneath them, regret. Genuine regret. "Mark," I finally said, my voice steady but soft. "It's too late for apologies. You had your chance. You chose your mom over me, over what we had. And I walked away. I'm not looking back anymore." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him breathing, probably searching for the right words, but there was nothing he could say to change what had already happened. "I understand," he whispered. "I just needed you to know that I see you now. I see your strength, your independence, and I respect you more than I ever did before. I wasn't ready to see that before, but I am now." I closed my eyes, taking in his words, but I didn't feel anything except a strange sense of relief. This was the closure I didn't know I needed. "I've already moved on, Mark," I said, with a finality that surprised even me. "I'm not the same person I was when we were together. Better. I'm stronger." "I know," he replied, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry for everything, Lucy. I always will be." I didn't need to say anything else. I didn't need his apology or his words anymore. I had found my peace, and that was enough. As I hung up the phone, I realized something. This wasn't about him. It wasn't about his mistakes or my heartbreak. It was about me. I had chosen to move on, to let go of the past, and to embrace my future. A future that was mine to create. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift off my chest. The world felt lighter now, more open, as if I had stepped into a new chapter of my life. I was free. Free from the past, free from expectations, and most importantly, free from the need for anyone else's approval. As I looked out the window, watching the rain fall softly against the glass, I realized that I was exactly where I needed to be. This was a new beginning. A beginning that was all mine. It had been a few months since that phone call, and I had settled into a rhythm I never thought I'd find again. Work was fulfilling, my friends and family were supportive, and most importantly, I had found something I didn't know I was looking for, myself. It wasn't about the wedding I'd once dreamed of. It wasn't about Mark or his family, or anyone else's expectations. It was about the woman I had become through all the trials, the heartbreaks, and the moments of doubt. One evening, as I was preparing dinner for myself, something I had started to enjoy more than I'd expected, I found myself smiling. I wasn't just smiling because of the meal, but because for the first time, I realized I didn't need anyone else to complete me. I had spent so much of my life believing I was incomplete without the validation of others, without someone beside me. But now, standing in my kitchen, with the hum of the world outside and the soft clatter of pots and pans around me, I realized I was whole. I thought back to all the times Mark's mother had belittled me, to the prenup, to Mark's silence when I needed him most. At the time I had thought that if I could just win his approval, if I could just make things work, everything would fall into place. But now I knew better. The more I reflected on everything, the more I understood that true strength doesn't come from surviving someone else's judgment. Comes from surviving your own doubts, your own fears. I had done that. Had chosen myself. I sat down on the couch after dinner, a cup of tea in hand, and let my thoughts wander. I remembered the version of me who had been so desperate to please, to prove herself worthy of love and acceptance. I remembered how I used to feel like I had to earn my place in the world. But now, I didn't feel that way anymore. I had learned that I was enough just as I was. And that realization, that was the most freeing thing of all. I took a sip of tea, letting the warmth settle in my chest. I felt proud of the woman I had become. I had taken a painful situation and turned it into something beautiful. I had found my own worth, not in the eyes of others but in my own. A knock at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked over to answer it, and when I opened the door, I found a delivery man holding a small package in his hands. "Delivery for Lucy Montgomery," he said, offering it to me. I signed for it and took the package inside. As I opened it, I found a letter, and inside that letter was a small envelope. I unfolded the paper and read the note inside. "Dear Lucy, I just wanted to say thank you. I know it's been a while, but I wanted you to know that your strength has inspired me in ways I can't fully explain. You taught me how to stand up for myself. And for that, I'll always be grateful. I hope you've found the peace you deserve. Best wishes always, Mark." I sat there for a moment, the letter in my hands. I hadn't expected this. But even so, I felt a sense of closure. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to him. His words didn't hold any power over me anymore. I folded the letter back up, put it in the envelope, and placed it on the counter. I didn't need to keep it. It wasn't for him. It was for me, to show me how far I had come. As I sat back down on the couch, I smiled. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And that, I realized, was the ultimate reward. It had been 6 months since I ended things with Mark. 6 months of rediscovering myself, of finding peace and joy in the small moments. It wasn't always easy. There were days when the memories of the past crept up on me, making me second-guess everything I had gone through. But with each passing day, I felt more certain that I had made the right choice. I was sitting at my favorite cafe one Saturday morning, sipping on a latte, when I noticed something strange. A familiar face across the room. It was Mark. He was sitting alone, staring into his cup, lost in thought. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a rush of emotions that I hadn't expected. I hadn't seen him in months, and now here he was, sitting only a few feet away from me. For a moment, I debated whether I should go up to him. I had spent so much time trying to forget him, to move on, and now, there he was, a part of my past that I couldn't avoid anymore. But I didn't need to run away from him. I didn't need to avoid the past any longer. I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked over to his table. He looked up, his eyes widening with surprise as he saw me standing there. "Lucy," he said softly, almost as if he didn't believe I was really there. I didn't expect to see you. I didn't expect to see you either, I replied, my voice calm but steady. It's been a while. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment, but then he motioned for me to sit down. I did, taking the seat across from him. I wasn't sure what I was expecting from this conversation. But one thing was clear: I had changed. I wasn't the same woman who had been desperate for his approval. I had learned to stand on my own, to be proud of the choices I had made. I've been thinking about you a lot, Lucy, Mark said, his voice low and sincere. I don't blame you for ending things. I never should have let my mother control everything. I should have been the one to stand up for you. I listened quietly, taking in his words. I wasn't angry anymore. The pain had faded, replaced by a sense of understanding. He had made his mistakes, and I had made mine. But we were both in different places now. I appreciate that, Mark, I said, looking him in the eye. But you didn't stand up for me when it mattered most. I needed you then, and you weren't there. And that's something I can't forget. He nodded, a look of regret in his eyes. I know. Hurt you. And I can't take that back. But I can forgive you, I said quietly. Because I've forgiven myself. And I don't need to hold on to that anger anymore. Mark seemed to relax a little, and I could see a flicker of relief in his eyes. But I wasn't looking for his approval. I wasn't looking for closure in the way I used to. I had already closed that chapter in my life. And I was okay with that. You're right, Mark said with a small smile. I think we both needed to grow. And I think we're both better off for it. I nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. I'm glad you think so. I'm happy for you, Mark. Truly. But I've moved on. I'm in a different place now, and I think you are too. He looked at me for a long moment, then finally smiled. I'm glad to hear that. I hope you find everything you're looking for, Lucy. And I hope you do too, I said, standing up from the table. Take care, Mark. As I walked out of the cafe, I realized that I had finally come full circle. I didn't need to carry any more baggage from the past. I had made peace with it, and now I was ready for whatever came next. My life was no longer defined by what had happened with Mark. It was defined by the choices I made, by the strength I had found within myself. The future was mine to create, and for the first time I was excited to see what it held. It had been nearly a year since I walked away from Mark, and life had unfolded in ways I couldn't have predicted. I was no longer the woman who had felt powerless, stuck in a relationship that wasn't right for her. I was someone who had finally taken control of her destiny, and I was proud of that. One morning, I woke up with a sense of excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. I had signed up for a new business venture, something I'd been passionate about for years but had never taken the leap to pursue. I was going to start my own event planning company. Felt like a huge step, but it also felt right. I spent the day researching, reaching out to potential clients, and setting up meetings. Every step I took, I felt more confident in the decision I had made. This wasn't just about a career. It was about building something for myself, for my future. As the days went by, I realized how much I had changed. I was no longer waiting for someone to approve of my choices or tell me what was best for me. I had become the person I had always wanted to be. Strong, independent, and ready to take on whatever challenges came my way. One evening, after a long day of work, I sat down with a glass of wine, reflecting on everything that had brought me to this point. I thought about the wedding I almost had, about the heartbreak, and about how much pain I had experienced. But I also thought about how far I had come. The woman sitting in front of me now was unrecognizable from the woman who had been afraid to stand up for herself. I thought about Mark and his family. There were no lingering feelings of anger or bitterness anymore. I had forgiven them, and more importantly, I had forgiven myself. The past was behind me, and I was no longer defined by it. I was defined by the strength I had shown to move forward, to live a life true to myself. As I sipped my wine, I smiled, knowing that the future was wide open. I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I had faced the hardest part, standing up for myself, and everything else felt like a new adventure waiting to unfold. And in that moment, I realized something important. I didn't need to have all the answers. I didn't need to know exactly where I was heading. The only thing that mattered was that I was walking the path I had chosen for myself, one step at a time. I felt a peace inside me that I hadn't known was possible. I was ready for this new chapter. I was ready for everything the future had in store for me. The months after I launched my event planning business felt like a whirlwind. There were ups and downs, of course, but every challenge taught me something new about myself. I had finally built something on my own, and with each small success, my confidence grew. One afternoon, I was sitting in my office, surrounded by the designs and contracts for an upcoming wedding I was planning. My phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. "How's everything going with the business? Are you happy with how things are shaping up?" I smiled and typed back quickly. "It's going better than I ever imagined. It's crazy, but I'm loving every minute of it." As I leaned back in my chair, I thought about everything I had been through. It had been a year since Mark and I had parted ways, and I realized that I hadn't just moved on from him. I had moved on from everything that had held me back. His family, their expectations, my own fears, and the doubt that had once clouded my judgment. I had always thought I needed someone else to complete me, to make me whole. But I had learned the hard way that I was already whole, just as I was. I had always been enough. I had just needed to believe it. As the months passed, I didn't just build a business. I built a new life. A life where I made my own decisions, where I wasn't afraid of walking away from things that didn't serve me, and where I could confidently say that I was living for myself. I met new people, formed new relationships, and watched my business grow. And with each new connection, I realized something important. The people who truly mattered didn't come with strings attached. They respected me for who I was, not for what I could give them. I didn't need to prove myself anymore. One evening, as I was closing up my office, I received a call from my mom. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice warm. "I've been meaning to tell you something. I'm proud of you. I can see how much you've grown. You've come such a long way." I felt my heart swell with emotion. It wasn't often that my mom expressed her pride so openly, but it meant everything to me. Her approval was the one I had always sought, and now that I had it, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I had earned it on my own terms. "I love you, Mom," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for always being there for me." We talked for a few more minutes, and after we hung up, I sat in the silence of my office, letting the words sink in. The truth was, I didn't need to chase after anyone's approval anymore. The only person I needed to prove anything to was me. And that had made all the difference. As I locked up the office and headed home, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. The journey had been long and at times painful. But now I could look back and see how much I had accomplished, how much I had grown. And for the first time in my life, I truly understood what freedom felt like. I wasn't bound by the past. I wasn't weighed down by the need to prove my worth to anyone. I was free to live my life on my own terms, to create the future I wanted, without the shadows of rejection or betrayal looming over me. The future was mine, and for the first time I was ready to embrace it fully.